The rain-soaked cobblestones blurred beneath. Carolyn's tear-filled eyes as the carriage lurched forward, carrying her away from the only home she'd known for 3 years. Her trembling hands clutched the worn carpet bag containing everything she owned, a few dresses, her mother's locket, and the shattered pieces of her dignity. Behind her, the grand estate of the Ashford family disappeared into the mist, and with it, any hope she'd foolishly harbored of belonging somewhere. She could still hear the Dowager Duchess's venomous words echoing in her mind. "You were never good enough for this family, girl. Did you truly believe a merchant's daughter could ever become one of us?" The old woman's face had been twisted with contempt as she'd ordered the footman to remove Caroline from the premises, not even permitting her to say goodbye to the man she'd devoted herself to during his darkest hours. Caroline pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching the English countryside roll past in shades of gray and green. How had it come to this? Just 6 months ago, she'd been sitting beside Sebastian's sickbed, holding his fevered hand through endless nights, reading to him when the pain grew too intense, encouraging him when the physicians offered little hope. She'd sacrificed her position as governess to the neighboring family, spent her meager savings on medicinal herbs the doctors wouldn't prescribe, and prayed until her knees ached on the chapel's stone floor. And Sebastian had lived. Against all odds, the Duke of Ashford had survived the mysterious illness that had ravaged his body and stolen nearly a year of his life, but he'd been unconscious when his mother discovered. Caroline asleep in the chair beside his bed that final morning, her head resting near his hand. The Dowager had drawn her own ugly conclusions, refused to hear any explanation, and within an hour Caroline had been branded a opportunistic seductress and thrown out like yesterday's trash. The carriage hit a rut, jostling Caroline from her miserable reverie. Through the rain-streaked window, she noticed they were passing through the village where she'd often accompanied the Ashford family to Sunday services. Mrs. Brennan's bakery stood on the corner, its windows dark now in the early morning gloom. Caroline remembered the baker's wife, a kind woman who'd once given her a loaf of bread when she'd noticed. Caroline looking thin and exhausted from her vigils. Without thinking, Caroline rapped on the carriage roof. "Stop, please!" Just for a moment. The driver, a gruff man hired by the Dowager to ensure Caroline left the county, reluctantly pulled the horses to a halt. "Make it quick, miss. I've got orders to have you to the coaching inn by noon." Caroline stepped down into the muddy street, her boots immediately soaked. She approached the bakery and knocked gently. After a long moment, Mrs. Brennan appeared, wrapped in a shawl, her face creased with sleep and confusion. "Miss Caroline, whatever are you doing out in this weather at such an hour?" The whole story tumbled out. Caroline couldn't stop it, even if she'd tried. Mrs. Brennan's expression shifted, from shock to fury to deep sadness. When Caroline finished, the older woman pulled her into a fierce embrace. "That wicked old crow," Mrs. Brennan muttered. "You saved that boy's life, you did. Everyone in the village knows it. The doctors had given up, but you never did." She pulled back, gripping Caroline's shoulders. "You've got more nobility in your little finger than that whole family combined. Title or no title." "I should go," Caroline whispered, her throat tight. "I don't want to bring trouble to your door." Mrs. Brennan disappeared inside and returned with a cloth-wrapped bundle, fresh rolls and some cheese. "It's not much, but you'll need your strength." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Wherever you're going, Miss Caroline, you hold your head high. Goodness has a way of being rewarded, even when it seems all hope is lost." Caroline climbed back into the carriage, clutching the warm bundle to her chest like a lifeline. As they pulled away, she allowed herself one last glance toward the direction of the Ashford estate, invisible now beyond the hills and rain. She never saw the horse and rider exploding through the manor gates. A mile behind them, Sebastian had woken to chaos. His mother had been in his room, looking tremendously satisfied with herself, when he'd opened his eyes for the first time in 2 days. The fever had finally broken completely, and for the first time in months his mind felt clear. "Where's Caroline?" were his first words. His mother's expression had soured immediately. "That opportunistic little wretch has been dealt with. You need not concern yourself with—" "What did you do?" Sebastian had thrown back the covers, weakness and fury battling in his limbs. "Mother, what did you do?" The truth had come out in bitter pieces. His mother had found Caroline asleep beside him, as she'd been countless times during his illness, always proper, always decent, always simply present when everyone else had given up hope. But the dowager had seen scandal where there was only devotion, impropriety where there was only care. "She's been gone 3 hours," his mother had said coldly. "And good riddance. When you're thinking clearly, you'll thank me for protecting the family's reputation." Sebastian had never dressed so quickly in his life. His valet had tried to help, but he'd pushed the man away, buttons misaligned, boots barely pulled on properly. His mother had tried to block the door, but he'd moved past her with a strength that surprised them both. "Sebastian Ashford, you are a duke. You cannot go chasing after some common girl like a lovesick fool." He'd paused only long enough to look back at her. "No, mother. I'm chasing after the woman who saved my life, the woman who never left my side when my own mother barely visited, the woman who is worth more than all the titled ladies you've paraded before me combined." The stablemaster had tried to insist he was too weak to ride, but Sebastian had saddled Perseus himself, his hands shaking but determined. His steward, Thomas, had rushed out with information. The carriage had taken the north road, heading toward the coaching inn at Millbrook. Now, as Perseus's hooves thundered against the muddy road, Sebastian felt more alive than he had in a year. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead, and his partially recovered body screamed with exhaustion, but he didn't slow down. He couldn't. He'd lost too much time being sick, being unconscious, being unaware of the sacrifices Caroline had made for him. Thomas had told him everything during those first frantic minutes, how Caroline had spent her own money on medicines, how she'd researched treatments in the library until midnight, how she'd talked to him for hours when the doctors said hearing familiar voices might help him fight. She'd loved him, he realized. Perhaps not romantically, though his heart hoped desperately that might be true, but she'd loved him enough to give everything she had when he needed someone most. Through the rain, he spotted the carriage. His heart leapt. "Caroline!" His voice was raw, barely audible over the storm. "Stop that carriage!" The driver must have heard something or seen him approaching, because the vehicle slowed. Sebastian brought Perseus alongside, nearly falling from the saddle in his haste to dismount. His legs buckled, and he caught himself against the carriage door. The door opened, and Caroline's face appeared, white with shock. "Sebastian, what are you? You should be in bed. You're barely recovered. You could relapse. You're not going anywhere." His voice came out rougher than intended, emotion and exhaustion making it crack. "Caroline, please. You're not going anywhere. Your mother is wrong about everything." He pulled himself up straighter, though his whole body trembled. "She's wrong about you, wrong about what happened. And wrong if she thinks I'll let you disappear from my life when I've only just woken up enough to see clearly." Rain poured down both their faces now. Caroline climbed down from the carriage, and he saw the tracks of earlier tears mixed with fresh rainfall on her cheeks. "I was only trying to help you," she whispered. "I never wanted anything in return. I never expected—" "I know." He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. "That's exactly why I'm here. Caroline, do you know what I heard during all those fever dreams? Your voice, reading to me, talking to me, telling me about your day, about the garden, about anything and everything. You were my anchor when I was drowning. Anyone would have done the same." "No," he shook his head emphatically. "No, they wouldn't have. Most people visited once and gave up hope. You never did. Even when I was nothing but a burden. Even when there was no promise I'd ever wake up, you stayed." "Because—" Caroline's voice broke. "Because I couldn't bear the thought of a world without you in it." The confession hung between them, fragile and enormous at once. Sebastian stepped closer, bringing their joined hands to his chest. "Then give me the chance to build a world with you in it. Not as a patient and caretaker. Not as a duke and a merchant's daughter. Just as Sebastian and Caroline, two people who've already been through the worst together and somehow found something worth fighting for. Your mother will never accept it. Society can adjust." A weak smile crossed his face. "I'm a duke. One of the few benefits of the title is that I get to decide who's worthy of my regard, not the other way around. And Caroline, you are the worthiest person I've ever known." She was crying openly now, and so was he. The driver had diplomatically turned away, suddenly very interested in adjusting the horse's harnesses. The rain continued to fall, soaking them both to the bone, and Sebastian knew he'd probably set his recovery back by weeks with this impulsive ride. He didn't care even a little bit. "Come home," he said softly. "Not to be dismissed or tolerated, but to be honored as you should have been from the beginning. Come home and let me spend the rest of my life proving that goodness and devotion matter, more than any bloodline ever could." Caroline searched his face, and whatever she saw there must have convinced her. She nodded once, then again, more firmly. "Your mother is going to be absolutely furious." Sebastian laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "Probably, but I've faced death and won. I think I can handle my mother's displeasure." He squeezed her hand gently. "Besides, I'll have you beside me. That makes me brave enough to face anything." As they rode back together toward the estate, Caroline in the carriage, Sebastian on Perseus beside the window so he could keep her in sight. The rain finally began to ease. By the time the manor came into view, streaks of sunlight were breaking through the clouds. The Dowager Duchess was waiting on the steps, her face like a thundercloud. But Sebastian dismounted carefully, offered his hand to Caroline as she stepped down from the carriage, and faced his mother with quiet resolve. "Mother, I'd like to introduce you to the future Duchess of Ashford. I suggest you become accustomed to the idea quickly, because I intend to announce our engagement by week's end." The old woman's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. Sebastian simply smiled, turned to Caroline, and guided her past his mother and into the house. They had a great deal to discuss, plans to make, and a lifetime to build together. But in that moment, with Caroline's hand in his and the sun finally breaking free of the storm clouds, Sebastian knew they'd already overcome the hardest part. They'd found each other. Everything else was just details.